Undisciplined rabble, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillors, and to those who are listening online. Welcome to East Gippsland Shire Council's ordinary council meeting of 15 of September 2020. Effective from 1 May 2020, amendments to the Local Government Act 2020 allows virtual council meetings to ensure decision-making can continue during the coronavirus pandemic. The council meeting must be live streamed, and East Gippsland Shire Council will live stream, record and publish its meeting via webcasting to enhance the accessibility of the meetings to the broader East Gippsland community. These recordings are archived and available for viewing by the public or used for publicity or information purposes. Pre-recorded videos for public questions and requests to speak on an agenda item submitted in the correct form prior to the council meeting will be played at the appropriate time during the meeting and included in the recording of the meeting. No other person has the right to record council meetings unless approval has been granted by the chair. And as per the Minister's Good Practice Guidelines issued by the Minister for Local Government on the 29th of April 2020, the intention is to ensure the normal, ordinary business of Council can continue through the use of electronic communication. A member's attendance can only be recorded as present where the member can confirm that they meet all three of the following. They can hear proceedings, they can see other members in attendance and can be seen by other members. They can be heard to speak. Councillors must confirm all of the above conditions to be noted as present for the meeting. A quorum will not be made if these conditions are not met, and the meeting will be adjourned until a quorum is met or postponed if a quorum cannot be met. If technical difficulties are encountered by Council during the meeting, including the live streaming, we will adjourn until the resolution of the issue or postpone to a later time and or date. I will now confirm with each councillor in turn that they can see, hear and be heard by each other, and note assurance from each that the location that they are participating from is secure to ensure deliberations are confidential. So, firstly, I'll go to Councillor Ellis. Could you please turn your video on?
I have hit the correct button and I can see myself, Mr. Mayor. I can see the members of Council and I am in a safe and secure place.
Just though, Councillor Ellis, your actual vision is not coming through. So what I might do while that's being corrected is I'll go to Councillor Roberts. So the three things that you must be able to do, Councillor Roberts, which is hear, see other members and be heard, and that you're in a secure location.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can confirm that what you've just stated is true and correct. I'm in a secure location. I can hear you and I can see you, and I trust that you can see me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, I can. Thank you. So back to you, Councillor Ellis, now that that glitch has been fixed.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can see you, I can hear you, and I can see other members of Council. Good.
Thank you. And Councillor O'Connell. Can you
Thanks, Mayor.
see and hear? Yes.
See and hear you, and I'm in a secure location.
Thank you. So, I'll begin. The Victorian Government announced on the 23rd of April 2020 amendments to the local COVID-19 Omnibus or Emergency Measures Bill 2020, which relates to the Local Government Act 2020, allowing council meetings to be conducted by electronic means, video conferencing from the 1st of May 2020 until the 1st of November 2020. The amendments have provision that councillors will be able to electronically attend council meetings, and the requirement that council meetings be open to the public will be satisfied where the meeting is live streamed by following the link on Council's website or Facebook page. So on behalf of Council, I would like to acknowledge the Gunai Kurnai people, the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered, and pay our respects to their elders both past and present. So moving to item 1.2, which is apologies, I'll ask our acting CEO, Ms Weigel, if we have apologies, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The only apology I have is from the CEO, Anthony Bass.
Thank you. Item 1.3, declaration of conflict of interest.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. None received at this time.
Right, councillors, 1.4 is a confirmation of minutes of the last ordinary council meeting. So that's moved by Councillor Routino, seconded by Councillor Peltz. So councillors, all those in favour of accepting the minutes of the last meeting? Thank you, councillors, that is unanimous. So the next meeting, and this is at 1.5, our ordinary council meeting is the 6th of October 2020, to be held at this stage at our corporate centre at 273 Main Street, Bairnsdale, at 6 p.m. Do we have any requests for leave of absence?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. None have been received at this point.
Thank you. Requests to speak to your community project?
No requests have been received, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Anything for public question time at 1.8?
No public questions have been received.
Thank you. And at 1.9, I see that it is in the agenda that there were nil petitions. So we have at item 2, which is item 2.1, notices of motion and or rescission. So we do have, would you read it out please?
We have two notices of motion. Notice of motion number 3-2020, Council's leasing and licensing policy for council-owned land and council-managed land. And a second motion, number 4-2020, management of Crown land, Omeo Caravan Park, applying council's leasing and licensing policy for council-owned land and council-managed land.
Thank you, Ms Weigel. Councillor Peltz.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's with great pleasure that I bring this to the table tonight as an item that the councillors have been remiss, and we've missed the implications of these particular issues that we'd like to rectify before the term of this council. I so here move that motion 3/2020, Council's leasing and leasing policy for council-owned land and council-managed land. Take notice that is my intention to move at the ordinary council meeting to be held on Tuesday the 15th of September 2020 at 6 p.m, or at any adjournment of that meeting, that council leasing and licensing policy for council-owned land and council-managed land, section 2, expression of interest, subsection title, commercial or partially commercial tenants, page 4, be amended to read: in the case of a partial commercial lease, licence or agreement where the Chief Executive Officer has determined there are demonstrable economic, social and or environmental benefits for the wider community through a formal resolution, Council can exempt the proposed lease or leases for the requirement of a competitive expression of interest process to be undertaken. You want me to keep going? Okay. The rationale behind this and the reasoning for my request is in raising this item is because I would like to propose that the Council's leasing and licensing policy for council-owned land and council-managed land needs to be amended. I refer specifically to section 2, expression of interest, subsection titled commercial or partial commercial tenant, page 4, wherein one of the paragraphs states that in the case of a commercial lease licence or agreement where any demonstrable social, environmental or economic benefit for the wider community, the Chief Executive Officer can exempt the proposed lease or licence from the requirement for a competitive expression of interest process. I'm proposing that the above paragraph should be restated to read as follows. In the case of a partial commercial lease licence or agreement where Chief Executive Officer has determined there are demonstrable economic, social and or environmental benefits for the wider community through a formal resolution, Council can exempt the proposed lease or licence from the requirement for a competitive expression of interest process to be undertaken. The proposed amendment aligns with the former council policy titled Rental Policy for Council Land, Owned Land and Council Managed Land, and therefore provides the opportunity for councillors to discuss, debate, assess and decide on whether council will pursue a competitive expression of interest. I am proposing this amendment to council's leasing and licensing policy for council owned land and council managed land also on the basis that 1. It will align with the best practice principles as outlined in the state government's leasing policy for Victorian Crown land document, and 2, if adopted, it shall be applied to any leasing and licences that are due for renewal. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz. I just seek some clarification from Mr. Canizzaro. I believe that possibly you should have read the green paragraph. Could that be? Is that correct?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as Councillor Powell has presented her notice of motion, as placed in the agenda, there is an additional amendment to that notice of motion, at which point we will need a resolution to accept that amendment into Councillor Powell's notice of motion. So if someone wants to propose that amendment, and we will seek a mover and a seconder and resolve that to include in the notice of motion.
Yes, happy to do so, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we have Councillor Reeves has moved that, and actually Councillor Rotino did second that. So. Yes. Yes. So we should put that to the vote to accept the amendment. But do we? Should we have read that
It would
paragraph?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, councillors. So the amendment is, in accordance with the Governance Rules, Section 10.14(5)(c), I'm requesting the Chief Executive Officer present a report to Council within 3 months that reflects the above proposed amendment to the leasing and licensing policy for council-owned land and council-managed land.
Do we need to vote? Yes. So, all right, thank you, Councillor Reeves, for reading that, and for all those councillors, I ask you, if you wish to vote in favour, please raise your hand. Well,
Oh, we're voting, no worries.
yes.
This is for the amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, accepting the amendment, yes. Thank you, councillors, that's been accepted unanimously.
Thank you.
Yes, we have everybody, yes.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I was just
Councillor Connell.
I was just curious as to whether it needed to be posted on the screen so the councillors who are actually satelliting in, so that they actually could view it, or whether they've actually received a copy from their emails at home of the amendment.
I've got the digital copy in front of me.
Oh, thank you, Jackson, for confirming that, and I presume...
So,
Dick and
Councillor
Natalie
O'Connell, do you
too.
have the amended copy in front of you? Thank
Yes.
you. And Councillor Ellis?
Yes, I've read it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to support it. I don't know, Councillor O'Connell, did you get to vote then?
Yes, she did. Yes.
I was a bit late to the party, but because Councillor Peltz interjected when we were voting, so I was waiting, but that's
Now, just also before we proceed any further, I saw your hand go up before, Councillor Roberts. Did you wish...
It was querying the very issue that you raised around the amendment to the motion. I was just unsure of which motion we were moving, and we've resolved that. So thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Good. All right, we get to... Yes, I was going to ask if... Yes.
Okay, thank you, councillors, and this is a really important issue, and it is important in the fact that it actually affects all leasing agreements with the East Gippsland Shire Council, and the wording as such that it has been leaving the executive officer to determine whether a leasing agreement is suitable or not is not specifically what should be in place. And for the council group, it's more appropriate for the councillors to be determining that. And I believe by putting this motion in place, we're actually taking the council CEO and the officers, separating them from the equation of being put out there for mischievous comments on collusion or setting up some kind of bad reputation. So I put this out there in the best faith that this is the more correct wording for this particular motion, and I believe it is fixing an anomaly that we actually didn't see when we adopted the original policy. And sometimes these policies come to the table and you don't fully understand the implications of these things until you're confronted with the implementation of it. So what we're doing and what I've put in front of you tonight is actually amending something that we should have seen in the first place and we didn't. So I do apologise to the community, and I am embarrassed that it's been that it's gone through and we hadn't picked it up at the time. So with that stated, I hope you can appreciate when this policy did come to the table, it was directly after the bushfires, and it was a time when we were probably a bit vulnerable and probably not at all accepting of the full extent of our duties at the time. So I do apologise for missing it. And I'm hoping that my councillor colleagues here will support it and rectify the situation. And with the lease agreements that are coming up shortly, I'm hoping that it will make all of the lease agreements fully functional and equitable for all parties to be able to, be able to put in decent tenders or expressions of interest that will be competitive and in the best interest of the, as the Crown Land says, in the best interest of our public purse. So thank you. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Happy to support the second the substantive motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. I was actually going to ask if there were any councillors that wish to ask Councillor Peltz any questions at this stage.
So,
otherwise, okay, we'll go to a mover and...
well, I've indicated that.
Councillor Ellis, you wish to talk to...
Very correct. I'm happy to support the tenet of Councillor Peltz's motion before Council this evening. It's a difficult in language and in interpretation, and it's a matter that we need to address in policy review. Unfortunately, the life of this council is restricted, so we won't be able to do it fully ourselves in the time that we have left. However, we can, by the actions being recommended for adoption by Council tonight, recommend that we address some of the weaknesses that have been identified in this new leasing policy, some things which we did not pick up until the policy was put into practice. I won't go into a number of calls I've received this evening in relation to this particular matter, but it is something that is of some urgency and needs rectifying, and councillors in this group here are to be commended for the consideration and workings that we've done in the last several weeks and thoughts given to addressing this rather complex and difficult policy interpretation. Councillors, I encourage you to support the motion tabled before you this evening. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Would anyone else wish to make comment? Yes, Councillor Reeves.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, councillors. Look, there are Victorian government guidelines for the leasing of public land, and two in particular are those principles I just want to draw our attention to. And first is about providing benefit to the public through leasing, and the second is consistency and transparency in leasing. And I think that comes to the heart of this particular notice of motion, and I thank Councillor Peltz for bringing it to the table and making us aware of that slight anomaly that has significant implications. But what's very important here is that we have asked the CEO to bring to the next council a modification to that policy, and in this public forum we will ensure that is the case, councillors.
Thank you for that insight. Councillor Rotino.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll speak in favour of it as well, and just along the lines of Councillor Reeves, the principles and guidelines, I believe this notice of motion that Councillor Pells is adding value to what was already there. I think what we already had did address the principles, but this notice of motion just adds more value to that and more strength to that policy potentially when it comes back. Thank you.
Good, thank you. All right, we just with that done, yes, I suppose you have a right to respond.
I do. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Colleagues, I do encourage you to support this motion tonight. With regards to the wording, it will be correcting the means by which the executive officer can basically decide that the current lease agreements can be brought into or cut short, and I think it's unfair in regards to someone that is actually in the position of having a lease with council, that at any stage it can be withdrawn, or if it can be proven that it's been mismanaged, it be taken in-house without negotiations. And I feel by putting the council table between the officers and the leasees, it actually gives a role of a mechanism of negotiation to be able to happen around the table in regards to these very important positions or these very important contracts that, you know, they employ people in our community, they're economic drivers. These people do a great job of providing a service for our community, and, you know, they are quite often the first call of tourism to our region. So, you know, we want everything to work kosherly, and we want to be able to work hand in hand and in agreement in the best practice that we can. So with that stated, I thank my colleagues for their constructive words around the table, and everything is meaningful here. So I put it back to you, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz. So, ask for somebody to move. We've not done that, have we? We
Yes,
did move.
Mr
So
Mayor,
we
we've
are
done that.
Yes, we have. It's taken so long. I've lost the train here. That's all right. So, if there's no more discussion, I'll put this to the vote. So, councillors, all those in favour of this amendment? Thank you. That has gone through unanimously. Thank you very much. Now, that will move us to our second motion, which, preceding that, I believe Mr Canizzaro will read a request to speak on this agenda item 2.2. So please, if you could read this letter that's come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a request to speak on an agenda item number 2.2 from Sandy Beltrami of Omeo. The request to speak is item 2.2, motion number 4/2020, management of Crown Land, Omeo Caravan Park, applying council's leasing and licensing policy for council-owned land and council-managed land. Good evening, Mr Mayor and councillors. Firstly, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak on this item tonight. I would like to especially thank Councillor Pals for tabling this notice of motion for your consideration. The Omeo Caravan Park is an important component of the tourism sector in our remote town and an important part of my family's life. We have lived at and managed the Omeo Caravan Park for 13 years. And in that time have provided many new assets and improvement to the park and built the business to what it is today. And although we feel a personal connection to it as our home, we always knew the lease would end in June 2021. What we didn't expect is the email that landed in our inbox several weeks ago telling us to pack up and get out by March 2021. Without any prior discussion and without any ability to renegotiate or bid for a new lease. Nor did we expect, after our recent discussions, for council officers asking us to value our assets and improvements to provide an offer to buy them when they take over in June. What we did expect, and I think most people and businesses would expect, was that an open tender process would occur to ensure the best return on investment for public land and the best service for our remote community. This motion doesn't give us a head start on anyone else who wants to manage the park. This motion simply gives us the ability to fairly compete on a level playing field in an open process with anyone else who may want to run the park, including council. This motion also gives us and the community a certainty of the park continuing to run seamlessly if there is a change of management, and us the ability to realise the value of our assets and improvements. Like all towns in East Gippsland and further afield, like all our tourism businesses, the extended fire season and now COVID have made it tough financially. These things none of us can control, but removing our opportunity to bid for a new lease can be controlled, and I ask you to support this motion for us and for Omeo. You guys can control this process, and all we're asking for is a fair go. Thank you, Sandy, Lou and Pira from the Omeo Caravan Park. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Cannizzaro. So, Councillor Peltz, over to you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Cannizzaro. 2.2, we've read the first part of it, so I take notice that it's my intention to move at the council meeting of council to be held on the Tuesday the 15th of September at 6 p.m. or at any adjournment of that meeting, that to ensure council gains the best economic, environmental and social outcome for the future management of public land where the Omeo Caravan Park is located, council shall, number 1, apply the leasing and leasing policy for council-owned land and council-managed land and the state government leasing policy for Victorian Crown land and their respective intentions for the future management of the Omeo Caravan Park by entering into a competitive expression of interest process. Number 2, acknowledge that council may provide an in-house bid in that expression of interest process and request that the CEO to draft a process for council's consideration that details how this can be done, how it can be managed to ensure proper and due process is maintained. Number 3, where the expression of interest process is not resolved within 90 days of the end of the current lease, extend the lease of the Omeo Caravan Park to 90 days after council awarding any new lease or resolving to bring the matter in-house to ensure continuity of service provision and the opportunity for the outgoing leaseholder to restore the site as determined in the lease. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz.
You want me to keep going?
I'm happy to second that, if that's what we're asking for.
Thank you, Mark.
So, yes, but we got
Got a mover, got a seconder.
Good, thank you. So would you wish to speak further on the matter? Thank you.
I bring this second motion to the table as originally it was two, and we decided one was about policy and one was about process, so we split the motion. And to determine that the people at the Omeo Caravan Park have a fair process, which is actually governed by the Crown Land policy overriding council policy. And in respect to that, I believe what we've just put in place and this motion will make sure that the due process is adhered to correctly. I do apologise for the heartfelt letter that Sally has actually had to deliver, and I apologise to her of the implications and the stress that it's brought to her. And I believe that, you know, there are other lease agreements around the region that will benefit from this as a base model. And I believe by putting this in place and specifically having guidelines to follow from the request that we asked the CEO to draft a process, that the council group can consider a suitable path going forward from his determination, and I believe that there will be much better practice into the future in regards to Crown managed land. And I believe that this actually gives a fair path should council decide that they want to do an in-house bid, as in competitive processing. And I would like to think that it is actually assessed by an independent panel, independent of council. And I believe that would be the best path forward. So hopefully the CEO's guidelines will actually instate that. And that way this lease policy can actually be, can fairly and justifiably be assessed on its own merit, and may the best contract or tender win, basically. I think that's what this is about. So I implore you, my fellow colleagues, to support this motion tonight so that we have a stepping stone towards best practice and what is acceptable out in the business community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz.
Mr. Mayor.
Before we, sorry, could I just, Councillor O'Connell, I'd just like to apologise to our minute taker that I did not verbally announce that Councillor Peltz had moved the motion and that Councillor Reeves had seconded it just for that purpose. So apologies for that. But yeah, go ahead, Councillor O'Connell.
I'd just like to move an amendment to the motion.
All right. Would you need to second that?
Well, would you like me to?
Yes, please.
Yep.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yep, so I'll just reread Councillor Peltz's motion with the words that I have amended. So at that meeting, that to ensure council gains the best economic, environmental and social outcome for the future management of public land, and delete the Omeo Caravan Park part, council shall 1. Apply the leasing and licence policy for council-owned land and council-managed land and the state government leasing policy for Victorian Crown land and their respective intents for the future management of council leases and licences by entering into a competitive expression of interest process. Number 2 remains the same, and then number 3, where the expression of interest process is not resolved within 90 days of the end of the current lease, extend the lease of the incumbent to 90 days after council awarding any new lease or resolving to bring the matter in-house to ensure continuity of service provision and the opportunity for the outgoing leaseholder to restore the site as determined in the lease. So there's only a couple of amendments. I'm happy to circulate that to the councillors on Skype if that would be of benefit to them, if they need to see it.
I'm happy to second it, Mr. Mayor.
Good,
Well,
thank
I'm happy
you. So,
I'd like to see it.
yeah, so if we could arrange for that to be seen.
Yep, I'll just send that around now.
So that's an amendment to the motion moved by Councillor O'Connell and seconded by Councillor Rotino.
Mr Mayor, if I may, would it be an opportune time just to have a pause while this comes through and we get to see it? Is that something that can happen, Mr Cannizaro?
Certainly we can adjourn, through you, Mr Mayor, we can adjourn for 5 or so minutes.
Good, thank you. I could be happy with that if we could ask the technicians to come in to stop the live stream for this period while we wait for these amendments to come through where everyone can get a good look at them.
If that's suitable to council.
Thanks. And can I ask Mr Mayor, please?
Councillor Ellis, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Just for the assistance of Councillor O'Connell, I think we're not allowed, or we can't send messages in the chat line in these particular meetings. You may have to send it by email.
I've just emailed it, Councillor Ellis.
Oh, you have emailed it, not chat, right.